You're listening to the Modern Mainframe, BMC's intelligent C optimization and transformation podcast, covering the latest trends and issues in the mainframe and how BMC AMI solutions can help you make change your competitive advantage.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Modern Mainframe. I'm Matt Delaire. Recently, we posted an update to a popular blog post by BMC product developer Devin Berchtold, detailing how he has followed in his grandmother's footsteps, developing COBOL for the mainframe. Given some of our recent retrospectives surrounding the 60th anniversary of the IBM System 360, and the fact that it's just a cool story, I asked Devin to coordinate a podcast episode. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome today's guests, Devin Berchtold and his grandmother, Pat Rinehart. Devin, Pat, thanks for being here today.
Hello.
Hi, glad to be here.
Pat, you started working with COBOL in the late 1970s. Can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up working on the mainframe and what your role was?
Well, the mainframe was the only option. When I started, little apples were out. We had at home an Apple IIe, but nobody did work on those. They were just kind of for fun.
Right.
They were so small, 16K, there wasn't much you could do. You didn't run any work business on it. So when I studied, it was, a number of languages, but mainly COBOL. And so at first I started out a couple of small things on the Apple IIe and was very anxious to get a job on a real computer, which was the big one, the big guy. And so that's what my really one and only job in COBOL was for a mail order company.
What kind of tools did you use to write and enter code?
You wrote it on a big tablet. It's just a big tablet, little like a graph paper type thing. Every line was a line of code and instruction, and you just wrote on that, one line at a time, one teeny tiny instruction at a time. There were no such things as sections of code that was ready that you could just grab and use. That didn't exist.
Right, so you had to manually write each one.
Each one, yeah. Right. That sounds tedious, but I loved it. It was so precise. Every single thing was so precise. No mistakes could be made. No extra letters. No anything. I liked it.
I can say from my perspective that definitely does sound tedious. I think I think you also mentioned that after writing it on the paper, you would have to send it off to someone else to actually key it into the computer, right?
Right. It was like, we did not key in our own thing. You would turn in a completed program, sometimes a lot of pages, half a book of code, and then wait several days till you'd get your cards back. You'd get it, you knew that on a certain day you'd get your stack of cards back with all the code on it, and then you'd sit down and go through that and try to make sure that everything was the way you wanted it. But we were lucky. We didn't have to type it in.
For a standard project or a job that you were doing, what kind of time frame was there?
Well, it varied depending on what you think. We weren't inventing programs. We're usually given some, we need this or we need that, and you would write it. We were not trying to come up with new ideas for new projects. And so it all depended on whether you were doing a pretty quick job, but it would always be several days to get the cards back. When I was working for the mail order company, it would come a lot faster, of course. Sometimes those things were not as long as what we'd done when I was studying, maybe in 2 days or a day, even if it was pressed, you were pressed for it, you could get back some code to run, to test out.
So when I run code, I usually get it back, I compile it and I get that back within like a minute. And sometimes
Sure.
It takes longer than a minute, and I get frustrated because it takes too long, and it takes too long for me to
right.
test.
I know. That's the way it was. And of course, we didn't think it was terribly long. It was amazing that you could accomplish that you could, have a program and then have a machine do that much for you within a matter of a few days. That was incredible. It's all a matter of perspective.
Right. And I've talked to some other people who have said that kind of shaped the way mainframe programming was treated, is that, that's the way it was, and that's what people got used to. And even
Yeah.
sometimes as tools kind of could have sped things up, they said, well, that's the way this is.
Yeah, I think one thing that's big, I guess, in my generation now is we say that people used to do things like waterfall, where you would plan out your project months in advance, and then plan out a whole timeline of what you're going to accomplish over those months. But now we try to move a lot faster. So rather than have one big project you plan over months, we would try to break that down into small pieces and then have little chunks that we can actually complete, maybe within a couple weeks, and then you build those different little chunks together into the full project. But the idea is to always be making progress every couple of weeks.
Yeah,
I can imagine that that's a lot different.
Right. Yeah. We had a few projects where one or two, 2 people, 3 people would work on small sections and then put it together. That's true. Even then we did it. I remember one session when I guess it was an instructor, and he was saying to the group, he says, okay, so if you've got a really big project and you need to get it done in a certain amount of time, how do you do that? And somebody in the audience piped up and said, you get women to do it. Thinking they could get that thing done. They could work together and get it done.
Yeah.
Some people didn't really like working with other people and sharing code.
I think you might see a little bit of that today still, but
really,
we're
that's
definitely encouraged to work together.
Yeah.
Devin, how did you end up on the mainframe? Was it something you heard about in school, or was it something that came up after?
Actually, in school, like during my college classes, I didn't hear about it at all, really.
Right.
So U of I doesn't have a dedicated COBOL or mainframe curriculum, I guess. So the only time I heard of COBOL was during the history section of my computer engineering intro class.
History.
So I'd never heard of it, but I ended up at CompuWare because I had an internship there and I just really liked it. So I'd never worked on the mainframe before, but just kind of stumbled into it and then found it interesting. And it wasn't until after that I learned that my grandma worked on the same stuff or similar stuff.
Yeah. Well, the start of it, the historical part.
How did you find out? How did that come about?
I think I mentioned to her, what I was doing and what languages I worked with. And she says, oh, yeah, COBOL. I know COBOL.
Yeah, I think it was like that we just happened on it because I was asking him about his job.
That's pretty cool to find that out. So, Pat, we've seen a lot of technological advancements over the past couple of years, let alone over the past couple of decades.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
You have people using digital services on their phones and their computers, just in every aspect of their lives. Did it surprise you at all to learn that we were still using COBOL to run some of these things?
Well, I knew that big corporations had a lot invested in mainframes and programs that had been around, that they were modified and reused. So from that standpoint, it wasn't too surprising that it was still around there. But I was surprised that as far as it's continuing, and growing in a way.
Right.
I suppose it is, from what Devin says, that sort of thing.
So, Devin, it's pretty cool to have this connection with your grandmother. If you look forward to, say, 30, 40 years, do you think future generations will still be utilizing the mainframe?
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that it's been around for so long is kind of evidence in that direction. And I think because there's so much code out there, it's kind of just a fundamental rule that it'll be easier to update COBOL, the language, and update your programs to match the new modern version of the language than rewrite everything. So I think there will definitely be better ways to do it. Maybe your developers, your average COBOL developer will accomplish more in a shorter period of time, but I don't see it all being completely rewritten because there's already so much code out there.
Yeah, I'm sure. I imagine that's true. There's so many smidgens of programs and whole programs that can fit into new programs, things that you couldn't do before. And it's important to keep all that going, I guess.
And they don't have to do it all manually to rewrite them now. Certainly as the technology increases, it makes that much easier to accomplish and to see which programs are affecting other programs. It's not all just a manual process.
And it was manual, that's for sure. It was sit down with a pencil and a big pad and start out, I'd outline things the way I thought it ought to go and then start breaking it down into little pieces and line by line. It was a slow process.
Yeah, and I imagine if you had a program that had to like interact with another program or send data over to another place, then you have to go over to your other stack of papers and look through that program. But like with the tools I have today, I can, be in my program and it calls another program. I can just click on that program name and it'll open up a new file and show it to me. And similarly to how that has gotten a lot easier, who knows, maybe in the future you'll talk to your AI and say, hey, explain this program to me, or I need to make this quick fix to this program. And maybe your computer will help you out even more in the future.
Yeah, well, there was no emphasis on using other pieces of code or fitting two programs together. That just was in such an infancy that it just wasn't happening. I'm telling you, this is basic. We're going way back before you could do any of that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Maybe I was overestimating what you had available.
You were. But that's all right. But we got it done, the stuff we needed to do.
Now, Devin, do you see any similarities in the process with kind of outlining it, checking and double checking? How do you see the difference in those aspects of the process?
Yeah, so in many ways it is kind of similar. You do have to, have a picture in your mind of what your program's going to do before you, start writing it out. So I bet my grandma would sometimes draw diagrams of like what the program's going to be before you write the code. Yep. I still do that today. For if I'm going to make a complex program, I'll sometimes draw it out on paper, with circles and stuff connecting to each other.
Yeah.
But still, so yeah, you got to have an idea of the program in your head. But then I think once you go to enter it into the computer, her experience differs from mine quite a bit there.
Right.
Yeah. So you just type into your computer and you're typing the code just like I do if I'm on my laptop, huh?
Yep. And I don't have to send it to someone else to compile or double check it. It's just there.
Yeah.
That is done automatically, kind of. And it'll tell me if I spelled something wrong, as I'm typing.
So it's proofs itself, basically, or it tries to.
Yep. Yeah. So during that initial phase, when you're typing it in, that's what they call static code analysis.
Okay.
As you're typing it in, it'll do syntax checking and double check that you spelled your variable names correctly. And then when we actually go to run our program, if I'm making like a little change to our product, we usually have automated tests too, a separate program that either me or someone else on my team made separately, that it will double check that I didn't break anything with the changes that I made. So we have a bunch of automation that kind of helps us out along the way.
Fail safe.
Yep.
Fail safe.
Yeah, and we have a lot of those, because if you have a lot of those automated tests, then you can be quicker with your programming. You still got to double check and make sure you're doing stuff right. But if you have all those tests and I can run these tests to double check, that gives you peace of mind to know that your code is good.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Whereas,
Yeah.
Pat, if you found an error somewhere, you'd have to basically go through the whole process again, right?
Yes. It just means your program wouldn't compile, and that was bad. You'd have to go back, find that error, find what's wrong, and resubmit it. Get a new stack of cards. You could probably use most of the cards, but you'd correct wherever you found that error and start over. Or also, as an example, you could run it and it would compile, and you'd run the program, and maybe your data doesn't come up with what you were aiming for.
Right.
For instance, one of the things we did with the company I worked for, it was a mail order catalog company. So they would do targeted marketing. They kind of started the targeted marketing. We had a whole room of big wheels of tape, and they were names. Like these wheels were, 12, 16 inches in diameter, and one of the largest collections of names in the U.S. for a company. And I'd need to write a program that would pull out, say, 100,000 names of married couples with an income above, 100,000 or 50,000, whatever it is they were looking for. And you would kind of expect a certain number. And if your number didn't come out right, not enough of them, you had to go back there and make sure that your sorting was correct. And it all had to compile. If it didn't compile and you didn't get the right numbers, you had to kind of come back at it again. Or if they wanted to send out 1 million catalogs to a certain group of people, then you'd have to write programs to sort out however many in whatever area of the U.S. that you wanted.
Well, it's amazing how much things have changed and how streamlined they've become and how used to it we've gotten.
To me, anyway, it's an interesting topic because we're talking more than 40 years of computer stuff here, and the advances made, it's been amazing.
It really has been, and it's been great having the opportunity to talk to both of you about it. Devin, Pat, thanks for taking the time to join us today. Devin, thank you for orchestrating this whole thing. So thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's nice to meet you, Matt.
It's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation. For everyone listening, as I mentioned earlier, you can find a link to Devin's blog post in the show notes. I'll also include links to some other blog posts and podcasts we've done about working on the mainframe and the 60th anniversary of the IBM System 360. So be sure to check those out. Feel free to share your own experiences with us. As always, thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Modern Mainframe. Take care.
You're listening to the Modern Mainframe, BMC's intelligent C optimization and transformation podcast, covering the latest trends and issues in the mainframe and how BMC AMI solutions can help you make change your competitive advantage.